Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Lord protect us. May He nourish us. May we acquire the capacity to study and understand the scriptures. May our study be brilliant and may we not cavil at each other. Om peace, peace, peace unto us all.
Oh, sorry, Sairam. Welcome to the Sri Sathya Sai Center of Arcadia, and a very warm and special welcome to our guest speaker tonight, Sri Praveen Makkena from Boston. And let me read his bio, and then Brother Praveen, I'll hand it over to you. Praveen Makkena was born into a family that has been in Swami's fold since the 1940s. Swami has visited their house several times. He was in the first batch of students at the higher secondary school in Prasanthi Nilayam and studied there from 6th to 12th grade. He later on completed engineering, foreign trade, and executive MBA at Harvard. He currently works for a multinational company in the capacity of Senior Vice President and Head of the Business Unit. Praveen has experienced Swami's love and omniscience on innumerable occasions. He is an active participant in Sai activities in Boston and currently serves as the president of the Chelmsford Sai Center in Massachusetts. Welcome, Brother Praveen, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. I know it's late for you in Boston, and I'll hand it over to you. Sairam.
Sairam, thank you. Firstly, I offer my most humble salutations at the lotus feet of Swami. Respected Reddy, sir, and all the elders, brothers and sisters. Sairam to all of you. So, today I've been asked to share the experiences of Swami, especially that we had good fortune, and my whole family, right from grandparents to us, had great fortune to spend with the divine love. And so I don't know where to start, frankly speaking, because it is, while it starts in 1940s, where my parents have got married by Swami. And so there is a lot of history from the mother's side, and there's a lot of history from the father's side. So the mother's side starts from 1940s, and father's side starts from 1950s, early 1950s. So I've been asked to speak for 2 weeks. So the way I thought would be best to do justice for both the sides would be to talk about my father's side this week, and see what are the experiences that they've had, the whole family had had. And next week, I will talk about the mother's side of the family. So to start with, on the father's side, this was early 1950s, I believe. There used to be a family doctor called Dr. Lakshmi, who used to be a Swami's devotee then. And she used to keep telling my grandfather, who was a mica miner and also a landlord in Nellore district, which is in Andhra Pradesh, south of India. And she's been, telling my grandparents to visit Puttaparthi and talk about Swami multiple times. And they kept on pushing it, till such day that they had decided that they should see who's this boy called Sai Baba. And so they went to Puttaparthi. I believe this was in 1954. And when they went there, Swami spoke to them, and he said the first thing that Swami asked him, and his name is Babu Naidu, that Swami used to call him while he was Krishna Prasad, but he was well known as Babu Naidu. So first thing that Swami looked at him and said, Babu Naidu, what took you so long to come here? So it's very interesting how these things happen. I think we are so fortunate that we are born in the age of Swami. And I think all of us here today, we are here for a reason and for a purpose, that why we are here, which a lot more times that we don't see and realize this. And so my grandfather, I believe then he felt so happy. Then Swami called him for an interview, him and his father, his family. And Swami told everything about his life, about his parents, what is the hardships that he has gone through to reach to a level to be called as the most famous Babu Naidu, as the Mica miner, and to the every detail. And my grandfather then just had no words to say, just fell at Swami's feet and said, you are not a normal human being. You are the God himself. That's how it started. And I believe they continued to stay beyond a week, which actually they initially planned to return back within 4 days. But looking at Swami's love, and which drawn so much that he continued to stay for 2 weeks in Puttaparthi. And one fine morning, I believe he wasn't keeping well at all, being a diabetic patient. And Swami looked at him and asked, what is the problem? Why are you like this? Then very reluctantly, he told Swami, I have exhausted all my tablets. So I have none, and I have to get back. Then Swami smiled at him and called the doctor. And some of you might know Dr. Sitaramaya then. So he called him and asked him to check what's his sugar levels. Then he said, Swami, yes, it is critical, and I think he should get his medication. Maybe he should leave immediately. Then Swami smiled at him, and then Swami created, and see what is coming from my hand. And Swami created exactly the same bottle with the same tablets. And Swami said, see what is coming from Sai stores. And asked my grandfather to take the tablet and asked Dr. Sitaramaya to check again. And I believe it was normal. So that kind of was really, really surprised my grandparents and also the whole family. Then they continued to stay there for about a month and then returned back to New York. So that was one incident. So I'm trying to, there are multiple of these, but I was just trying to see for every, if I were to call it an experience or a miracle, there is a subtle way of how Swami teaches a lesson through each of these acts of Swami in a simple, loving manner that he sends a message. So there is one such message, I believe, after several years, when my grandfather was the biggest mica miner and doing extremely well. One fine morning, there is somebody who got in there to the mines and shut down the mines, complete mines, and said that you cannot continue to do anything more here. And so obviously there was a court and case and all of this was running and there's a lot of money being spent, but he kind of got to a point where he had to give up. And he left everything, took his family, came to Puttaparthi. And as he was in Puttaparthi after about a few days, then Swami asked him, Babu Naidu, why are you here? Then I believe my grandfather told Swami, all my mica mines are shut down and we have no income. And I have applied and filed a case. And I don't know if I'm going to win it at all because it is now beyond our control. And today, Swami, it is not about me. There are 2,000 families who work in the mines, do not have food. So he was feeling so bad, and telling Swami about this. Then Swami looked at him, and Swami looked up, and again looked at him into his eyes and said, Babu Naidu, when is the next court hearing? And he said, Swami, October 26th. Then Swami said, okay, go back to Nellore, go to the court, and I will take care of it. And I believe my grandfather did not understand what Swami was talking about. And he tried to educate Swami then, saying, Swami, you don't know how these things work in government. it's not easy to win a case of this size and nature and complexity, and it is government who is directly involved, and there's no way that we could even talk about winning this case. Then Swami smiled at him and said, Babu Naidu, you are going. You go to the court and the judge will call for your lawyer. And your lawyer, who does not have confidence, he knows that he's not going to win this case, he's not going to turn up. Then the judge himself will take the file. And then you will see what will happen. So go to Nellore tomorrow, first thing in the morning. That Swami insisted. So my grandfather, with a lot of reluctance, he left to Nellore. And as he went to the court, I believe exact the same thing that has happened. He went to the court, they called for his lawyer, he didn't turn up. And then the judge asked my grandfather to speak and talk for himself about this case. And as he heard all of that from my grandfather, then judge himself pulled the file. And I believe judge flipped few pages. And all of a sudden, judge kept his two fingers between his eyebrows and closed his eyes for a few seconds. And all the crowd who were sitting in the court were surprised what was judge doing. And after a few seconds, I believe judge opened his eyes. And after opening, he looked at the paper, he closed the whole file, and then he said, this Mica Mines was closed by the collector of the district, who has no right to do it. If there was any problem, it has to be done only by the mines inspector. So hence, I'm canceling this case. And he immediately announced that mines to be opened immediately. And my grandfather was so very surprised. And from the court, he directly went to Puttupatti and fell at Swami's feet. And Swami, like a child, he asked him, Babu Naidu, what happened? What happened? Why are you so happy? And then he was narrating the whole thing to Swami, I believe, and Swami was enjoying this. And Swami then finally, after hearing to all of this, then Swami said, so didn't the judge close his eyes? Didn't he keep his fingers between his eyebrows for a few seconds? And did he look at the crowd? They were surprised what was happening. So all of this, Swami was having a lot of fun asking these questions. And then Swami got serious and looked into his eyes and said, see, Babu Naidu, the day when I asked you, why are you here? You didn't ask for yourself. You said, Swami, because of me and because of our minds, there are 2,000 families who are out of food and they are starving. So that you praying for others has moved this divinity. And hence, what has happened is what Swami has done. So these are the very good example of how when you ask for others and not for yourself, wholeheartedly, with a loving heart, and that's what when Swami says, love all, serve all, and what does that mean in loving everybody, and the feeling, the spontaneity of somebody's pain is our pain comes in, and that's when this magic happens. Even the Lord of the Lords, Swami, would immediately ensure things are in place. Then moving on, as the years passed by, it had come to an extent that my grandfather's health was deteriorating because of serious diabetes. And it had come to a place where he had a wound in his leg, in his foot, which kind of got aggravated, I believe, to the extent that doctors had given up. And he was admitted in hospital. And my dad, who was then about 19-year-old, so he had gone to Swami and told him, Swami, he's in a serious condition. So doctors are saying that they should amputate his leg. What do you suggest, Swami? And Swami looked up, I believe, and said, tell doctors to go ahead. So my father got back to Chennai, then it was called Madras, and told them to go ahead with the surgery. And I believe the leg was amputated. And 3 days later, when my grandfather got conscious, and while he was talking, then he realized that his leg was no more. And with that shock, he was surprised and shocked, and that then he breathed his last. And so he then immediately doctors rushed to his room, checked, and then said, "We are sorry, he's dead." And this had happened very early in the morning, I believe, very, very early hours. And when my father was known of this, then my father immediately rushed to that time, I believe, fortunately, Swami was in Chennai, in a big house. Then my father waited for Swami to come out, and this was at about 8 a.m. that he went to that house, and he was standing outside the gate. And Swami looked from the balcony of that house and said, "Hey, that is Rambabu, ask him to come up." And so the volunteers immediately ran and got my father into the house. Then my father did tell Swami, father passed away, and you should surely come. And Swami was surprised. But then Swami looked at him and said, "Who said your father passed away?" Then he immediately called for the car, and Swami immediately rushed to the hospital. So by the time Swami reached hospital, I believe it was already 5 years since they have declared that my grandfather passed away, and they kept his body on the floor and with all the flowers, and all the relatives were all called. They were all sitting in there, my grandmother sitting next to my grandfather's body, and they were all weeping. And so that was when that Swami came and, came rushing into the hospital and said, "Babu Naidu, where is Babu Naidu? Where is Babu Naidu?" He was saying, and he was walking into the hospital. There were a lot of, the doctors and nurses were very surprised who this man is and why is he calling him, especially knowing that he's already dead. Then Swami said, Swami came close to my grandfather's body and said, "Who said Babu Naidu is dead? Hey, Babu Naidu, see who's come. Open your eyes." Then Swami immediately ordered for all these shirt to be removed and all the bedsheet and shirt, everything to be removed. And then Swami created vibhuti. And that vibhuti was so much so that he had, Swami himself said, "This is the time I should do this." And Swami rubbed up all his chest and the body. And so the body was absolutely turned white when Swami, so much so that Swami has put in the vibhuti. And then again, Swami tapped them and said, "See, Babu Naidu, Swami has come to see you." And for utter surprise of everybody, my grandfather got up and sat and said, "Swami, Swami, you are here, Swami, Swami, Swami." And he was just only saying Swami and started crying. So everybody was surprised. The doctors were so surprised, saying, "How could this happen?" And yes, that is Swami. Then Swami told Babu Naidu, "Don't worry, I'm here. Tell me what you want." And Swami created jasmine flowers and turmeric and also the kumkum, the vermicelli, and gave to my grandmother. Asked her to put them and hold on to them. And then Swami asked my grandfather, "Babu Naidu, tell me, what do you want?" So that time, my grandfather said, "Swami, I have only 2 things. One is that I have not got my last son, Rambabu, married. So he is my worry." That was one. Second thing, he also said, "Swami, I want the whole family to be taken care by you." And the Swami looked at him and smiled and said, "From today onwards, Babu Naidu, this is a word of Swami that Rambabu is my son. I will take care of the family." And then I believe my grandfather looked at and told Swami, "Swami, look at my leg. Look at what has happened to me, Swami." And Swami smiled and said, "Babu Naidu, this is Swami's word." And Swami said, "Listen again, this is Swami's word. From today, there's nobody in your family who will ever get diabetes. And this is Swami's word." And mind it, from that day, in fact, my father, my father's brothers, us, or all the children, none of them or none of us today have any trace of any of this. And that is Swami. And this was, till such time, it was a hereditary that all of them, my grandfather, father's father, grandfather's father, and grandfather's father's brother, everybody died because of diabetes. But that was the end. There was a full stop. That is what divinity is all about. When Swami gives a word, it is word. And when Swami said, I will take care of your son, Swami told my father to finish all the formalities and wait for my instructions. And these formalities, my dad did not understand what is the Swami is telling me about formalities. Then I believe after that, Swami left to Venkatagiri from Chennai. And that evening, the same evening, Swami was giving a speech. And all of a sudden, while Swami was talking, there was vibhuti coming out of Swami's mouth. And Swami held the mic, turned to Raja Reddy, and then told him, Raja Reddy, Babu Naidu is no more. So tell the family that my blessings are always there, and ask Ram Babu to finish formalities and come, which I already told him when I was leaving. So Swami exactly knew what was going to happen. And that's why when Swami was leaving my grandfather, I believe he did go to my grandmother and tell her that Babu Naidu will be with me in my heart. He's not going to go anywhere. And when we tie all these dots together, Swami actually absolutely has given the strength to the family to bear the loss, at the same time, 100% to Swami's instructions. So I believe after about a month of all this, one evening, Swami called home and my father picked up the phone. Then Swami said, Rambabu, this is Swami talking. And my father thought there was somebody else who was pulling a fast one. And he said, so there is nobody like that. He said, no, this is Swami calling, your Swami. And my father said, oh, Swami, Sairam, Swami. And Swami said, take your mother and take your sister, come to Puttaparthi tomorrow morning. And before he was keeping the phone down, then Swami said, drive slowly, don't drive fast. Then my father said, does my father agreed? Then the next morning, father, mother, grandmother, and the sister, all of them were driving to Puttaparthi. As usual, my father was driving fast, I guess. So at one point in time on the road, I believe he hit a stone and the car broke down. And so they were stranded on the road and nowhere to go. And they were waiting for some help. After a few hours, there was a jeep that was passing by, and there was a magistrate who got down and said, what is happening? Can I be of any help? Then my father said, there is a situation, we cannot take this further. So yes, we should certainly need help. And then the magistrate told my father, it is not right to be here with ladies on the road. So I will take both the ladies and so tell me, where are you guys going? And I can drop them and go. Then they said, we are going to Puttaparthi. He said, oh, very good. I'm also going to Puttaparthi. So it's it's a coincidence. I will take them to Puttaparthi. And, see, probably if you wait for some more time, you might see some people ask for help, and then you could come along. So he took both the ladies and, in the jeep and then went to Puttaparthi, I believe. And my father was waiting. And after a few hours, there was a lorry who came in and helped my father, tied the car to the truck, and then reached Puttaparthi. As soon as he reached Puttaparthi that evening, Swami was waiting outside the mandir. And as soon as my father was getting in there, and the car was being towed by this lorry, and they dropped it there, and my father directly went and fell at Swami's feet and said, Swami, I'm sorry, I was driving fast. And Swami hit him on his head and said, I told you not to drive fast. And then Swami looked at him and said, are you crazy? How could you send two ladies with an unknown man? What if that wasn't me as a magistrate? Never do this, is what Swami told him. And said, I didn't know how else I could explain to you. And that's why I had to send a truck. By the way, how did you come here? Well, Swami asked him and said, Swami, here is the truck. And when he looked back, there was no truck. It just vanished. So then Swami said, I had to get in a truck to tow you all the way here. And the Swami told him again, this is a word that you are giving me that you're not going to drive fast. So like this, there are multiple experiences that this family has gone through and experienced. For everything, there is a message of showing his omnipresence. That Swami is always there with the family. So coming to the next one was that I believe it had come to a place wherein the family and the property has to be divided. And Swami gave a word to my grandfather that he was going to take care of the family. And it was one such days that Swami told my father and also my grandmother and the sisters. There were totally 7 children, 4 sisters and the 3 sons. Then Swami called only my grandmother, sister, and my father into the room and said, yes, it's time that we need to divide the property among all the children. And he had asked my grandmother for a paper, and we could manage to get a paper. And then Swami said, where is the pen? Why don't you write what you have, what you know about your property? And they searched, they didn't have a pen with them. Then Swami created a pen, gave it to my grandmother, and asked her to write what all she knows. And I believe she was sitting and writing, and she could fill in about half a page of about, Swami, here is the land, here is the mica mines, here is our houses, and blah, blah, all of that stuff. Then Swami said, is this all that you know? And she said, yes, Swami. And he had asked my father and my father's sister, do you guys know anything more? And they said, Swami, we don't know. Then I believe Swami took the paper and pen, and Swami filled the rest of the paper, turned the other side of the paper, and Swami filled to the detail that somebody, to someone that my grandfather has given 20 rupees to 100 rupees in those days. So Swami had written to that level of detail. And then Swami showed it to them. Here is the paper. Here is your property. And then my father immediately said, Swami, give it to me, Swami. We will take care of it. And Swami smiled and said, what will you take care of this? It is a word that I gave to your dad. So now it's my response to divide this equally. And Swami folded the paper, I believe, and tore the paper. And my father was so surprised and said, Swami, you wrote so much and I don't have it today. Then Swami smiled, and then he took out, it is exactly 8 pieces of paper. And Swami told my grandmother, give this to 7 of your children, and this paper is for you. And when she opened it and saw, it was clearly written, the name of the person, here are these 5 things for you. Here is the name of a person, here are these 5 things for you. It is a clear, detailed, property division that had never happened, that we had never heard of, rather. So my father, despite all this, my father got on his knees and said, Swami, my eldest brother, who's the oldest brother, and he may not agree to this, Swami. What would you suggest that I tell him? And Swami looked at him and said, you're asking Swami this question after all this? If Swami wills, he can make a pauper to king, and vice versa. He can change the sky to earth and earth to sky. That is the power of this Swami. Never underestimate and never question this. So there is a great, great lesson coming directly from Swami on what he is and what his power is. So fast forward from there, as Swami said and promised to my grandfather that he would take care of my dad, Ram Babu. So Swami got him married. And till that, we were all born. And also when Swami got my parents married, And in fact, before the wedding, for 2 years, I believe my dad stayed with Swami and taking care of Swami and Swami's ashram and Swami's room. And during those days as well, my father being 19, 20-year-old, he still had some doubt. Is Swami's hair a real hair? So when people were coming, the guests were talking with Raja Reddy Garu was there, and all of them used to talk. And I believe one such occasion when there were some guests, then my father had got this thought saying, Swami's hair is shaking so much. Maybe it is not real hair. Maybe it's a wig. The moment he got the thought, then Swami immediately asked everybody to leave the room and told Raja Reddy to close the door and asked him to bring the comb and said, give this comb to Ram Babu because I have a lot of headache. And so I want Ram Babu to massage my head. And Swami told my dad to massage and told him, rub here, rub on this side, even more harder. So my father was surprised and said, to the extent that he immediately thought, why is Swami making me do this? Then he realized about the thought that he got that this is not a real hair and it is probably a wig or a fake hair. And then he fell at Swami's feet and said, Swami, please pardon me. These thoughts are crazy and I'm sorry, right? And fell at Swami's feet. And then Swami told Raja Reddy, I can read. I know everything, what happens in your mind, even if you're here in front of me or thousands of miles away. Remember this. You don't have to be in front of me. And I know what happens and where. So that was another a clear message that Swami gave through this experience of several of these that had happened. And I'm just only picking some of these which have really got a lesson to drive home. So then after that, of course, after the wedding, then we were 4 children, 4 sons, and including to that date that Swami had ensured that all the 4 sons have studied in Swami's school once the schools were constructed. And that's the word that Swami kept all through his life. That's why when people ask me, what is Swami to you? And Swami means many things to many people. And for me, one single word is grandfather. Swami is my grandfather who has taken care of the family. He stood by all the things that what he had promised my grandfather and taken my grandfather's position and did all the things that he had promised to do. So there are many more such experiences that had happened in our family, to the extent that while we were there in Puttaparthi and outside, just want to take a quick time check. So Krishna or Sridevi, please let me know if I'm going on. As we keep talking about Swami, we forget the time.
Please continue. Please continue.
Thank you. So, when we were kids and when we were studying in Puttaparthi, I joined in school, 6th grade. We all actually went for a summer vacation to Puttaparthi. And just before returning back, Swami called my father and said, this year I'm starting schools here in Puttaparthi, both the higher secondary school as well as the college. So all your 4 sons, ask them to study here. And we were actually somewhere in that crowd, and suddenly some volunteers came. They said, hey, Swami's calling. And we just rushed. And as soon as we rushed there, and Swami was talking to my father, as soon as my father looked at us, he said, take Father Mr. So we all fell at Swami's feet. We didn't know what was happening on top. Swami was talking to my dad. And it so happened that after darshan, my dad tells us that saying, his Swami is very gracious enough. And he said that he's given seats for all 4 of you, and all 4 of you are going to study here. And there was a time that we were saying, we have not got any of our clothes. We have not even told our friends. We have not, we have to go back to our school. So, but it is that Swami. And in fact, I had already finished my 6th grade. And I was told by the principal then that it was only 6th grade and 8th grade were the two that were starting in higher secondary school. And I was supposed to be getting into the 7th grade. And I had a reason. I said, I'm going to tell Swami that I'm not going to be here. I'm going to go back to Nellore. Then, so my dad next day told Swami, Praveen has already finished his 6th grade. He has to get into 7th grade. And you don't have 7th grade. It's only 6th and 8th that you're starting with. So maybe Praveen should go back along with us. And Swami said, no way, ask him to come to the room. So I went to the interview room. Then I was so happy that Swami was going to give me Padnamaskar, give me Vibhuti and ask me to go. But Swami said, your dad told me that you finished your 6th grade. No problem. Study again. You'll have a strong foundation. Take Padnamaskar. I was like surprised. And I said, Swami, and he said, no more talk. Just take Padnamaskar. And then so that's how we were there. While we were studying, it used to always, after a few months, we used to keep thinking as brothers, does Swami really know us? Right? Does Swami, because, Swami is talking to all the people, there's so much of a crowd. Does Swami know that, yes, we are the grandchildren of so-and-so, children of so-and-so? Yes, after that, after the initial, we getting into the school, he has not spoken to us. So how do I tell him? And what do we do? And this was kind of going on in our minds. So it so happened one day, there was one of the very famous Sathya, I still remember the name, who had come from Nellore, a very close devotee of Swami. And he was sitting in the VIP's line, and Swami was giving darshan, and he came to the students, and we were sitting in the portico. And Swami came there. As he was talking to all the the VIPs, then he looked at Dipal Puchaya Shastri and said, "Oh, when did you come?" And then he said, "Hey, by the way, see, I also have some students studying here in our school who are from Nellore." And then he pointed at us and said, "See, these are my very old devotees' children who are here." And Swami narrated quite a few things about my grandfather, Babu Naidu, and how many times that Swami had visited the home in Nellore, and what all the things that have happened, and how the family is, and how Swami got my parents married. And we were like surprised to see. Then Swami then came to us and then said, "Now do you know that Swami knows you?" So that's the conviction that we had got, saying Swami, and we fell at Swami's feet. Right? So anything that what we think is immediately known to Swami. Anything that, before even we ask Swami, Swami gives us. Anything that we feel for people or for anybody else wholeheartedly, Swami ensures that is given. And his omnipresence and omniscience that he had proven multiple times, to the extent that some of you might know, when while studying in Puttaparthi and when we are going to the vacation to home, Swami used to tell everybody, "Hey, don't eat non-veg, don't watch movies, right? Go and do service in your village or in your town, right? And spread the word and spread love to your family and relatives." This is what Swami used to tell all of us. And it so happened, in fact, my father, who then got into film industry, and despite Swami telling him, and despite him being close to Swami, he had constructed a cinema hall, a theater, and he has got into film distribution and exhibition business. And so we had our own cinema hall. So when we go for holidays, it was so difficult to control ourselves to get into the theater. And there's always a temptation at that age. So in one such trip, my brother, the older brother, so while we were all controlling, so he couldn't control himself, and he went inside the theater, sneaked in, and he was watching the movie. While he was watching the movie, he suddenly realized, "Oh my God, I should not be standing here or sitting in this chair." So we used to always carry the calendars, right, in our pockets. So we kept this in his pocket like this. And suddenly he realized that now his Swami's calendar is in his pocket. So he immediately took it out and turned it beside and kept it inside. and came out of the theater. So all of this is all forgotten, and we all came back to Puttaparthi after the holidays. And when we come to Puttaparthi, all the students are sitting in a row in the portico and in the veranda. Then Swami, when he's talking to students, and Swami knows, right? So who has seen movies, or who has eaten non-veg, or who has done multiple things. So Swami keeps looking at everybody and asking, what did you do? What did you do? How was your vacation? Are parents happy? All this Swami was asking and coming to us. And to the student sitting next to my older brother, Swami really got upset, that person. And Swami was scolding him to say, I told you not to watch movies, and you still did see movies. I know about it. I know. And the student sitting there, he was saying, sorry, Swami, I will not do this again, Swami. And Swami was really, really telling him and saying, you don't listen to Swami, despite Swami telling me so many times. After all that, my brother was sitting next to him, was actually sweating. And then after all this, Swami looked at him and said, what, Rag? Why did you show me only half a movie? And he was like shocked. He was thinking that till such moment that, Swami was scolding the guy next to him, but not him. But again, this is one other experience wherein Swami time and again proves that he is omniscient. And then that's when my brother told to all of us of what had happened, that how he had kept Swami's picture and turned it the other side. That's why Swami could see only half a movie, right? So there are multiple such occasions that wherein Swami has proven his presence always and ever. So maybe one of the last experience that I will share before I hand it over to Sridevi, and probably share some of these in the next week as well. So there was one such occasion where my older brother, he used to organize all the audio mics in the Purnachandra auditorium while he was in Puttaparthi in the hostel. And he was given that duty to set up mic and audio system for Swami's speech and all the functions. So I believe in one of those days during the Dashera time, Swami had come out of the curtains from the Purnachandra auditorium. He was giving darshan, and for my brother's surprise, he realized that all the amplifier and all of these are giving shock, including the mics. So there was no way that he could figure out what the problem was. Whatever he was touching was giving him an electric shock. And he was, trying to do all his best. And Swami had already gone to the ladies' side and then moved to the gents' side in the Purnachandra auditorium. He was walking. And then slowly Swami was walking towards the stage. And, after that, Swami would come onto the stage and Swami would give speech. And so these mics to be, kept on Swami's table. He was sweating and said, Swami, I don't know what to do now. And, he couldn't solve it himself. So I believe Swami climbed up the stairs of the Purnachandra auditorium stage, and he was walking towards the table. And my brother was sitting there. And as Swami was passing by, he was about to get up to Swami and say, Swami, and Swami just told him, wait. And Swami walked to that table, and both the mics, and as many of you have seen, Swami has those two mics. Swami held both of those mics in his hands and just kissed them, and then looked at my brother. And after that, when my brother touched, everything was normal, absolutely normal. So then, so these are several of these experiences that we have had while we were studying, and that Swami teaches a lesson that he is everywhere and he's omniscient. So with that, Sai Ram to all of you. Thanks for patiently listening. And I thank Swami for giving this opportunity and speaking through me and giving this message to all of us. With that, I hand it over to Sridevi Garu. Over to you, Sai Ram.
My goodness, dear brother, I think you've left all your listeners today speechless, including myself. These are the most amazing stories of Swami's omniscience and his love. And we can't thank you enough for all of this. Amazing, amazing stories. And we are so lucky we're having you again next week. You shared your father's side. We cannot wait to hear what mom has to bring to all of us. So we're very, very excited. I know it's so late for you, and you've just, I think, woken all of us up. We're extremely grateful and can't wait for next week. You've really recharged our batteries. Thank you so much.